If you are joining us for the first time, we appreciate you tuning in to this episode of Meat Speak, powered by the Certified Angus Beef brand. My name is Brian Schuff. With me, as always, is Chef Tony Biggs. How you doing?
Hey, my friend, my pal, my big brother. How have you been this week?
Tremendous.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. You know, I love meat, right? I love well-marbled, delightful, elegant, braised
You do?
meat. Today we're going to talk about, I feel like primals on the beef animal or subprimals are a bit like children. It's very difficult to say this one is my favorite, right? Maybe there's some moments when you have that thought, right? But today let's talk about Serratus ventralis, more commonly known across the culinary world as the humble short rib.
Wow.
Yeah.
When is the first time you had a beautiful braised short rib? So when I went to Culinary Institute of America, and I worked for classical chefs like Klaus Friedenreich and my mentors at the CIA, let me tell you what the utmost first cooking method was on their radar was braising. For some reason, braising, to be a great chef or a great cook, you must know how to braise, and you must know how to break those fibers and those connective tissues down so you have a tender, most delicious piece of meat.
Yeah. There's something there's something so elegant and classic about a braised short rib. Generally it's over a bed of starch of some sort. Generally, to throw out the word tender, of course it's tender, it's braised. But the short rib itself, because it is so packed with marbling, it is so packed with that intramuscular fat that when you braise a short rib versus braising something out of the round, for instance, there is this delicate beefiness that you just don't get anywhere else in the animal. And
how about fall off the bone?
Yeah.
How about fall off the bone? Beautiful, right? But as we spoke today, there's so many Asians. They do a lot of different things with the short rib, like the flanking cut, where you have those 3 bone-in rib type of off the chuck.
Yeah.
And it's about a 1/4 inch thick. And when marinated with soy sauce, some ground pear, ginger, a little bit of mirin for about 4 to 5 hours, and you throw these babies on the hot grill.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, you serve this with some garlic rice, and this is just epic. Unbelievably delicious.
So good. It is a grilled, a high heat application on something that's traditionally braised. Is there another cut out there that is, it's widely understood. Yeah, if you give this a low and slow application, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be delicious. But what other cut is there that you can say, or you could just slice it this way, crush it on a flat top, and it's equally delicious?
Well, they've I personally like to braise low and slow. And then when that short rib comes out of its braising liquid, of course I save it. I make a nice sauce out of it. But then I will throw that on the grill to get a little bit of char on it to give that nice crust around the short rib. And that's beautiful. Some of our partners are the greatest barbecue experts in the world. What do they do with the plate short rib, the 3-bone, beautiful plate short rib? When they just take that bone and it slips right out of the meat, that is like an epiphany to me, really. It's just amazing. You've done well, and that meat is cooked to perfection.
Yeah, when it falls apart completely. I don't know that there is another cut that has such an array of ways that it's used culture by culture. I mean, you talked about the way that it's classically used in Asia, or, Jewish style is also sort of that flanken style short rib as well. But, we've seen here in America, it's not just about that smoked plate short rib or those smoked chuck short, right? There
You
are
can do that with low and slow, Brian. You
yeah.
can do that low and slow in a marinade. My personal favorites are, sometimes folks go, oh, wow, what do I marinate in? Do I marinate in water, beef stock? I've marinated my short ribs in root beer and Coca-Cola to give that sweetness. So when when that short rib is breaking down in the braising liquid, you're getting all the beautiful juices from that short rib. Why would you throw it away when you can take that liquid and reduce it with the help of some beautiful spices like cinnamon stick and star anise and palm sugar and soy sauce, and you've got the Coke reduction that's going to give you that sweetness as well, and you make a beautiful sticky sauce with that to go over that short rib. That is just one application.
Yeah.
In the German culture, they love to use, in French, they love to use red wine and different bay leaf and different herbs to make their braising liquid. But you've seen a huge output in the purchasing of what are they called, crock pots around the world, right? Where families in America now are just, on the go 24/7. So they're picking up their bone-in short rib or their short rib, placing it into their crock pot, and at 6 o'clock they come home, and guess what? They've got a full dinner. Everything's falling off the bone, fork tender.
Yeah. So when we talk about the short rib or the serratus ventralis, that's a wonderful term to memorize. We are talking about the entire muscle that starts all the way down by the plate and crisscrosses the rib all the way up into the chuck, where even after the first chuck bone, your chuck short ribs that are bone in, right, will typically have 4 bones to them. But even after that first bone, the muscle continues into what's now become sort of more classically known as the chuck Denver, or the chuck flap is what it's known as. And then it even continues farther on into the underblade, which is classically found on, mom's pot roast. That, if you go to a chuck roast at the grocery store, generally it has some of that underblade still on. That's that same serratus ventralis muscle. And that robust marbling continues on throughout. So it's very consistent as we go. But, going back a few years, Andrew Zimmern visited our culinary center. And one of the things that he wanted to see was the chuck Denver, right? And in a grilling application, not a braised application, a high and hard steak application. And, that was just probably 3 or 4 years ago. But since then, I'm seeing chuck Denver steaks everywhere. What can you tell me about the Denver steak, right? It's a little more beefy because it's got that marbling in it, yeah?
Well, it's a fascinating question about the Denver steak. Those who are meatheads know what that is, right? You just explained it. But what we do at the Certified Angus Beef Culinary Center, when we bring chefs and customers in, we also provide an experience, education to make more money on secondary cuts of beef. And the Denver steak is one of those. It's actually gaining popularity in the restaurants and in banquets. But until someone experiences it, puts it in his or her mouth, they never really feel the appreciation for this. I've taught classes where, why use a filet mignon, a strip, or a middle meat for your breakfast item when you can get a low-cost item that tastes juicy, tender, has all the marbling, like a Denver steak and eggs.
Yeah, it's delightful. Coming up here, we're going to have a conversation with our favorite meat scientist on the entire planet, Diana Clark, and she's going to get a little bit more into the scientific side of it. But the thing that when I hear about short rib that jumps out to me is it's a bit of an experiment that we were able to pull off a few years ago, and it's the idea of dry aging a short rib, dry aging specifically a chuck short rib, right? So you've got the bones, you've got some added protection on there for a dry aging purpose, but at the same time, you can only take short ribs to 12 to 14 days at most before you've gone a little too far in the dry aging process with them. But I will tell you from just a pure taste standpoint, I don't know that there is a more robust funk in the dry aging process that I've ever had than is what come off of these dry aged short ribs. I don't know from a practical standpoint, from a yield loss standpoint, that it would ever make sense in a restaurant setting on a regular basis. I think when you actually run the numbers, it comes in only slightly more expensive than a prime tenderloin.
Imagine that in a burger.
Oh my Lord.
Imagine this in a 3-blend burger of that dry age chuck. Wow.
It's incredible flavor. But nevertheless, if you are one of these folks who likes to play around with their own dry aging program, perhaps you've tuned into one of our other episodes here on Meet and Greet talking about dry aging and talking about how to kickstart your own dry aging cooler. That is on there. Big, shameless self-plug if you want to look that one up. But maybe you are playing in that, and maybe you do have an opportunity to try your own dry-aged short rib. Chef, we are going to take a break now. We're going to come back here in a minute with Diana Clark, and we're going to dive deeper into the Serratus ventralis.
Hey, wait a minute. We're going to give all our customers, our listening customers, a chance to win, what did you say, a new Porsche if they understand all the meat cuts in Latin?
I will buy it for you with somebody else's money. How about that?
I love it.
We'll be back in a minute with Diana Clark talking Serratus ventralis. Back here on the podcast, frequent guest, one of the smartest humans I've ever met.
True.
Oh my gosh, you're just a wealth of knowledge. Diana Clark, meat scientist. How are you?
Doing good. How about yourself?
I'm really good because we're going to talk about one of my favorite. I feel like I say this about everything. I guess I just love food that much.
Or beef, specifically.
Right. We're going to talk about, to the layman, sometimes I like to throw around the Latin root just so it sounds like I'm more intelligent than I am. We're going to talk about Serratus ventralis today, which more commonly known in the culinary world as short ribs.
Yes.
Yeah. And short ribs, to you, I mean, they kind of hold a special part of your existence as well, don't they?
Oh, yeah. I always like to say short ribs just have that flavor that everyone goes to, that mom and pop flavor that your mom just cooked a roast and you're so excited that it was coming out and you just put gravy and mashed potatoes all over it. Just that homey goodness in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
So, I love it.
So good. They're so packed with, I feel like a lot of times when you see those raw meat shots where it's just packed with marbling, it's almost always a portion of that short rib muscle.
Always, period.
Yeah.
I feel like you can scratch out the almost. It's always marbled that well.
Yeah. Now, can you explain that? I mean, what does, so we're talking about, I'll say it again so I sound intelligent, Serratus ventralis. It's a muscle that starts down in the plate, right, at the bottom part of the rib, extends forward through the chuck and ends up terminating there. But can you talk about why is that, or is there a reason that muscle is so well marbled the entire way through?
I don't truly know exactly why the marbling's so dense there, but it starts on actually, so it'd be your 6th, 7th, and 8th rib. So that 8th rib is kind of where it starts moving forward. And then goes all the way up in through that first rib, kind of just nicks the top of it, and then continues on underneath that chuck roll. It's used a lot with locomotion, so I'm assuming that it's very vascular dense, and because of which it's needed a lot in the animal, so they're trying to make sure that it's always packed full of that nutrient, so the muscle can use it when the animal's alive. But for our purpose, it's just always that tasty piece that we know is going to pull through every single time.
It just works. A good friend of ours, if you are tuning in for the first time here and you want to go back through the podcast library, there's an episode all about kind of why meat matters in the world. And our guest that day was a good chef friend who both you and I know. His name was Rick Tremano.
Oh, yes.
And when we talked about Rick, about his favorite cuts, what's his go-to? He at first he kind of jumped on, of course, the tomahawk, right? Of course, it's flesh. But then he backtracked and he said, I really like braised pieces of meat.
Yes.
And when you think of short rib, I mean, to me, that is you can make your pot roast, but the short rib really is that elevated, high-end, he used the word elegant. It's just a really gentle presentation, yeah?
Yeah, especially when you just kind of just lay it on. Usually it's laid on top of like a polenta or mashed potatoes or something. It gives you that cushion effect too, and you don't need a knife. I mean, you really just take your fork and just cut through it like butter, and that flavor is just incredible.
Yeah, that fat content that you do find. So when we discuss short ribs, of course, a braise is the first thing that comes to mind, and probably to its detriment, has probably limited a lot of people's views of what to do with a short rib. But I mean, you've done a lot of work with the plate chuck, or the plate short ribs, the chuck short ribs, the various iterations of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where can you go with short ribs beyond just letting it cook for 12 hours in its own beautiful juices?
That's the best part about that cut. Is so short ribs, you can take it, cook it nice, low and slow, braised, make sure that you have all that moisture in there, retain that juiciness, or you just cut it a little bit thinner, cut it about 1/4 of an inch thick. Those are called your Denver steaks.
Yeah.
So now you get that beefy, robust flavor that you get in your typical braised short ribs, but you have that grill accompanying it with as well. So now you get that great char on the outside. It's delicious.
Yeah.
Everyone that tries it is amazed by it. The first time I had it, I thought, man, this is going to be tough as nails, but it's not.
Yeah.
It needs to be cooked to a medium degree of doneness, but once you hit that, I mean, you have these two combinations that you can't find anywhere else. And I feel like in the United States, we're like, yes, we've gotten this, but really this has been a staple in Korean barbecue for so long. I mean, they have their Korean barbecue ribs where they just cut them an 1/8 of an inch thick against the bone. So essentially they're creating thinner Denver steaks that they grill really quick on some hibachi style grills, and voila, there they go. And they've got all this tremendous flavor to them. And so now we're starting to realize, there's a lot of potential in this cut.
I'm glad you touched on that. The idea of the flanken style, short ribs, Korean short ribs. I've also seen him talked about as Jewish style short ribs, which I had never made that connection before as well. But can you talk about, classically, when you think of bone-in short ribs, there's plate short ribs, there's chuck short ribs. And I know you've done some work, a lot of times it seems like for years it was like, well, what's the difference? Well, the number of bones. But is there a little more to it in terms of even flavor variances that you may pick up?
Yeah, so your plate short ribs are going to have 3 bones. Your chuck short ribs are going to have 4 bones. But really, it's still short rib muscle and bone. You, in terms of flavor alone, I really don't notice much of a flavor. Now, I will have to say that as you move into your plate short ribs, you actually get a little bit thicker of a silver skin that goes over that short rib muscle. So you might have a more of a tougher bite at times, but you can easily remove that as well. Now, your plate short ribs usually will have a bigger, more impressive bone. They're just quite a bit longer, but that doesn't mean you can't get that fantastic presentation that you see also in chuck short ribs. We make some phenomenal ossobuco style chuck short ribs. I will have to say, Plum in Cleveland, wow. Their presentation of that is just incredible. It's a lot of fun to see people take these cuts that really are kind of great priced and make them look just elegant, and people just crave them then.
Yeah. You mentioned the Plum's short rib dish. That's a Vince Tomasic, Brett Sawyer combination. I believe it's meant to be a taco in the end, right? It's a self-serve taco where, for me, and I'm a meat guy, but for me, the taco shell it's like a Cool Ranch.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's just and knowing those guys, it's it doesn't really surprise you, and of course it's just tastes ridiculous. So we've seen the growth of the popularity of the Denver, right? I can remember 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I think the only menu that I ever saw a true Denver steak appear on was actually outside of Denver. Up in Boulder, it was at Black Belly Restaurant up in Boulder. It was the only place I'd seen the Denver on a menu. Now it seems like everybody kind of knows about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so can you talk about, with the fact that, that is a very, it's a very limited supply of those Denver steaks, of that serratus ventralis that extends past where the bone ends, so your true kind of boneless short ribs.
Yep.
But there's also an underblade component as well.
Yes.
Can you talk about that? You know, Vince Tomasic from the Plum, who you just mentioned, when he couldn't quite get his hands on the Denvers that he wanted, he took a page out of the Diana Clark playbook and went to his meat distributor, and I'll be damned if they didn't find him a fantastic alternative.
So that's the beauty of that muscle, is that so after your bone-in chuck short ribs, and you have your chuck flap that are all traditionally boneless, and that's where you can get Denver steaks cut out of. But if you actually look at the NAMP guide or NAMI guide that actually decodes all of your cuts and subprimals and everything, the true Denver comes out of that chuck underblade. And so the whole underblade of the chuck roll itself is more serratus ventralis. So now you don't have just this small block that weighs maybe 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds as you do in your chuck flap, but you have about 4 pounds, 5 pounds, depending on how big this chuck roll is, of just serratus ventralis that you can take and cut into more Denver steaks, or you can cut it into your smaller cubes that you can use for braising. So now you have this huge avenue to run these different menu items off of, and you're still using one cut. I really appreciate it more there. And when the chefs ask me specifically at Certified Angus Beef for some short rib muscle, I typically just pull off the bottom of the chuck roll. One reason, because we break down sides of beef and we have a lot of chuck roll. So, I mean, I can purpose that underblade, though, for those applications. I mean, they still do it the exact same way of braising it and shredding it. Smoked underblade?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Now that's incredible.
Now, why does the smoked underblade work? Is it because of the fat content?
Oh yeah. So now imagine this. So you're thinking about the smoking process. You're losing moisture. That's going to be a huge loss. So you lose about 20-30% of moisture alone. But now I've just condensed that beefy flavor. And chuck short ribs in general, that serratus ventralis muscle is usually 75 to 80% lean. That means that other portion of it is all fat, but marbling. And marbling, just that oleic fatty acid is so satiating, like we've talked about before with burgers and briskets and everything like that. I mean, you have that in your bite of barbecue, and it's incredible.
Yeah. You know, since we're on the topic of barbecue, you know, the idea of the plate short rib, can you talk about how, it kind of does smack against, you know, at least somebody like myself who has, you know, I enjoy eating, we'll say that. You know, the idea of a plate short rib versus a chuck short rib. I mean, why would you spec a plate short rib over a chuck short rib? It really comes down to presentation, right?
It does. Plate short rib, like I said before, that bone is more massive. It really just, it's the bone. The bone looks cool. It's giant, great presentation, especially in barbecue when you have this huge thing sitting down in front of you. Barbecue is already this barbaric, like caveman-esque deal. So now you have this big hunk of meat with the bone. It has bone in it, so you're allowed to eat it with your hands by rules. So it's just that aspect of it. And chuck short ribs, the bone's just shorter. I mean, that's really the only difference. But from a flavor standpoint, that bone is not adding any flavor. Yeah. But we're now more so than ever in the era where we eat with our eyes. I mean, we don't just eat with our eyes. Our neighbors look at our pictures and they eat with their eyes. It has to look good. We always fight that presentation battle. And that's why I think so many people are gravitating towards those plate short ribs. Yeah. But now we're starting to realize you can have that incredible plate presentation with our chuck short ribs. And it gives you so much more leverage on your menu.
Is it just kind of a general misnomer? I mean, yes, the chuck short ribs, the bone is going to be shorter, but it doesn't mean it's always that much shorter, right?
Correct. It's not always. It honestly depends on what that packing plant has homes for elsewhere. Yeah. So if I'm a packing plant that has a home for chuck flap, well, maybe my chuck short ribs don't have as many boxes that they're going into. So I'm going to cut those smaller and make my chuck flap larger. So that way I can put more pounds in those boxes and sell more meat versus putting it in that chuck short rib box that I don't have a home for. So it's kind of getting in that balance and figuring out who the best packing plant is to work with in order to get your spec. And maybe you have high enough tonnage where you can even say, hey, this is the way I want them cut, and I'm going to guarantee that I'm buying them from you at this point. So you could kind of work with some of those and see what you can get out of it. But that's the biggest struggle with chuck short rib is you can have that varying degree of bone length. When plate short ribs is pretty consistently going to be a longer bone, and usually you can even spec a 6 to 9 inch size bone too.
Yeah. A lot of chefs, a lot of food people in general are concerned about food waste, right? And the bone is generally something that people struggle to do with. And I found a fantastic use for that plate short rib bone when you're done with it. And I learned this from our friends down at Black's Barbecue. Jenga. Bone Jenga. It's a beautiful,
That is incredible.
Yeah, you get a few short ribs and you get a few
Oh my gosh, I really like that.
Yeah, a little bone Jenga is good for the
I
for
have
the soul.
yet to see that.
Yeah, it's
Gosh,
it's
they
very,
always,
very impressive.
Barrett is just always thinking of that next great thing. I swear.
Yeah, but to this day, you still can't really eat the bone.
No.
We're working on that. Though,
No,
right?
I know. Well,
All
maybe
right.
one day.
That's
Maybe.
Cook them long and slow. Diana Clark, meat scientist. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us once again. Chef Tony and I will be back in a moment to talk a little bit more about delicious short ribs. We'll be back. Back here on the Meat Speak podcast, Brian Shaw, Tony Biggs. That was Diana Clark, meat scientist. Always love hearing
Love
from
her.
Diana.
Just
me-
love her.
Love me some Diana Clark.
Yep.
Chef, short ribs, serratus. I'm just going to keep saying it. Serratus ventralis, serratus ventralis, serratus ventralis. Say it. It makes the mouth happy to say it. Classically, it's a braised item, right? But sous vide is also, not only is it acceptable, there are probably some advantages to doing a short rib under vacuum, are there?
Unbelievable. Chefs are, and even just the classical cooks at home, we're in an age now that people really know what they're eating. They know they're educating themselves about food. And there's a lot of folks out there who know more than maybe a classical chef, or because they've studied and that's their passion. But sous vide over the last, it's not an old term. I was using it in the late 80s with Via de France and the Hyatt Corporation, but it really didn't take off until the last 10 years when molecular cuisine became very, very popular, and that's really part of the cooking staple. That's a piece of equipment now that all chefs have in their kitchen to produce really great, fine quality meals. The great attributes with sous vide is longer cooking time, slower cooking time, and uniformity of your finished product.
Yeah.
So it's not just falling off the bone as maybe, a short rib. If you're braising, the bone falls off. You got kind of a control over your product that's, in sous vide in the water bath. And then right now, those are cooked products. You can chill them, put those in your refrigerator, your freezer. If you have an order in a restaurant, you can take it out, retherm it, and voila, you've got a beautiful, beautiful product there.
Yeah. And once it's done, once you've cooked it, whether braise or sous vide, the folks, I think I probably know more people who've got it on their menu and they actually do a sous vide process. A lot of times it's because you can. The temperature control is very specific.
Very specific.
Yeah. But once that process is done, or honestly, even before it goes into the bag to get sous vide, there are some different knife cuts that you can do that'll make that'll make this a pretty unique cut. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? We've discovered 5 stars to our meat scientist Diana Clark. She's done amazing things with her knife, and the one thing that we've learned and put that out in the industry is the plate short rib ossobuco, and also the plate short rib tomahawk. These are amazing. It's a matter of cutting the plate short rib in a different technique, taking the skin and the connective tissue off the bone, leaving a 5 to 6 inch bone, and then wrapping that meat around the bone, tying that like you would do a roast or a chuck roll or a roast, and then braising it, keeping it all together, and you have a beautiful, just absolutely gorgeous, stunning, center of the plate cut with a 6-inch bone coming out and a beautiful sauce, and just fall off the bone tender, Brian.
Yeah.
Epic.
Yeah. And it's funny when you look at the palates of most diners, as as robust and impressive as your classic rib tomahawk is, the ribeye steak with the long bone attached to it. I don't know, speaking as somebody who, is a bit of a professional eater, I don't know that I would choose a traditional tomahawk over a braised short rib tomahawk, just because there's so much richness in that short rib that you don't necessarily get from more of a grilled steak item.
Brian, why is it that when you eat a short rib and the sauce is epic, incredible, you just want to close your eyes and just savor every single morsel bite?
Yeah. I actually find myself doing, it's the same thing I do when I eat really good barbecue. Once I'm done eating, I'm looking for bread to mop up every last bit of jus that I didn't.
I spill this on my lap. That's why I need those plastic bibs when I eat barbecue, because I'm taking the cornbread, which is crumbly already.
Yeah.
It's coming from my mouth, and I just look so idiotic when I eat barbecue.
Well, Chef, that is about all the time that we have for this episode. If this is your first time tuning into the Meat Speak podcast powered by the Certified Angus Beef brand, we invite you to subscribe. It's available across most podcasting platforms. And if this, by now there are a number of other episodes that you can pick and choose from if you like what you're doing. Or if you want to shoot us an email, let us know if you like what we're doing, if you don't like what we're doing, if you have some ideas for things you would like to learn from the good chef or our meat scientist friends. Just shoot us an email at podcast@certifiedangusbeef.com. We'd be quite happy to hear from you. So until next time, Chef.
Bye-bye.